We went to our favorite U-Pick orchard today to pick a few Golden Delicious apples. This is a small orchard, has less than 200 trees total, but she has at least 5 different types of apples and then a little bit of other fruit. And the price is terrific. She only charges 50 cents a pound for any of the apples. Going to do a little bit of apple picking this year. Probably only going to do a couple of batches of freeze dry. But boy, the Golden Delicious are beautiful this year. Finally getting around to processing the Golden Delicious apples that we got a couple of weeks ago. They've been sitting in the refrigerator since then, and I will be wearing a glove the whole time on this one to cover up that little boo-boo band-aid from the stitches. They're out and everything's healing nicely. See, I can move. Can't grip real tight still, but everything's working. Now we're going to use the peeler core slicer on these and get them ready for freeze drying. And I am going to peel these because I'm going to cut them up into littler pieces for putting into cereal or making them into other things. So, and I'm using my laser again to align the center of the apple. It's just easier for me than bending down and looking through that to make sure I've lined it up. And there's no way I can just line it up and hope. I have a container of ice water and I've added a teaspoon or 2 teaspoons of ascorbic acid to it, or vitamin C, to help keep them fresh. And of course, if you have fruit fresh, you could use that. But that's just a mix of vitamin C and a couple of other things, and this is cheaper to use. I'm gonna cut them in half first. So that way I can check to find out if there's any core pieces that need to come out. And I would take out a little bit right there where it shows a little bit of the core pieces still. And I just like to use a scoop. I just use a scoop. Oops, it moved out of the way. And that cuts it right out of there. And then, like I said, I'm going to cut these up this time. So I'm gonna kind of cube them. I'm not even sure what the best way is to do this. I'm just going to cut them a couple of times this way. And then cross cut them. So that'll make a bunch of little pieces that I think will be good for cereal. And I could also use them for pies or something like that also, little pieces. Okay, so there's an example of pieces of the core in there. And I'll try to do this one the right way without letting it go. And by cutting through that, essentially what I'm doing is making that hole for the core a little bit bigger without having to have a bigger hole for the entire apple, because that's just not needed. And of course, if you don't want to peel them, you just put this down and it keeps the peeler portion out of the way and just doesn't peel them. Yeah, so a little bit of the core showing right there. And I don't like that piece to eat, so I'm gonna take it out. This one doesn't seem to have any of that. So just that little centerpiece of those two. And just by taking out that little bit of extra, it gets rid of that. Get at least 2.5 pounds of apples at a time. So that's only 750 grams, so that's not terribly much, but let's see what it looks like. Kind of pressed down. Nope, I want more than this. If I had a 5-tray machine, this would probably be just about right, a 5-tray medium, because I would be putting 10 pounds spread out over 5 trays, so I'd only need 2 pounds a tray. So that would only be about 900 grams on a tray, but I have the 4-tray one and I still want 10 pounds, so I need about 1,130 grams or a little more. to be on there. So I need some more on that one. So we'll get these all filled up and into the freezer for pre-freezing or straight into the freeze dryer depending on timing. I already have the other chopped apples in my freeze dryer. These are going to go in my sister's freeze dryer. That way I can get them all done at once. First we'll get the weights on them, find out how much they weigh right now, because I don't even know the totals yet. And I've already written down the tare weights on these, because these are the same ones I used on of my sister's earlier, so I already know the weights. And now it's 1573. Tray 2, 1637. And each one of these trays ended up with 10 apples on it. 1642. So the weight difference is just how much the apples weighed. 1598. Tuck a thermometer in each one so I can get some information about the process as it's going. I just want to tuck it down there so it's about 2/3 of the way down. We'll get a thermometer in each one and we'll get it in her machine. Her machine, it's already been running for 3.5 hours because I thought I was going to get the apples prepped really quickly. It took me a long time. It's a lot slower chopping a bunch of apples than it is just putting them through that peeler, corer, slicer, and then throwing them onto the trays. So chopping them all up took a long time. So it's had plenty of time to cool. And during that time, you can see it's got a pretty decent amount of condensation on the front. And if it weren't for this bubble pad insulation, it would be frozen around that outside edge probably by now. Because 3.5 hours is quite a long time to pre-chill it. And it'll need more. I almost never put anything into the freeze dryer that's not already frozen. But because of freezer constraints right now, and space availability in the freeze dryer, I'm putting them in there not frozen. So it needs extra time for freezing. Okay, so tray 4. And the thermometer alongside right now shows about -20. And you can see I still haven't finished making that disc for my sister's machine. It is coming soon. The little cubes of apples tend to freeze dry a little bit quicker than the bigger slices and slabs. So we may be able to, well, it'll still be 2 days from now before we take it out because it's like 8 or 9 at night right now. So we'll be back and check on this one in about 2 days. In the meantime, we'll take a quick look at mine. It's already loaded. I loaded it before I loaded this one because it was closer to me. And we'll see how it's doing. But I also put those in there without pre-freezing them. So it's a rare thing for the way that I do it. I almost never do that, and I've done it a few times recently. So let's go check my machine out. We're over at my machine. I loaded the apples in my machine over an hour ago, and it's been running for over 4.5 hours already. Like I said, I thought I was going to just start the machines and prep the apples and get them in there real quick. Took a lot longer to prep them that way than I thought it was going to. When I put the apples in this machine, it said that it was 57 below, and the thermometer on the side was reading -40. But of course I put scorching hot apples in there. They were 60 degrees, and so that brought the temperature up, and it's slowly coming back down. Right now it says that it's 20 degrees on each of the trays. So it's dropping nicely, but it's going to take more than 3.5 more hours before it gets cold enough to start. So I'm going to add a little bit more time, and I'll check it before I go to bed, make sure that it's still going well, make sure it doesn't need additional time. That's one of the things that the new machine does very well, I think. It runs the vacuum freezing for a few minutes, and that kind of lets it know, is the food frozen enough? If it sublimates too much water off too quickly, well, that's going to raise the pressure quickly, and it'll know that it's not frozen enough. On this, it's manual. I need to make sure that it is frozen enough before I let it go to the main dry cycle. And that's simple, just add time on the timer as it's freezing. That's one of the things I really like about this, is that it's real simple to add time at pretty much any stage. And because I almost always run it with pre-frozen food, it's usually not an issue. I just freeze it, pre-freeze it for an hour or so, put the food in, let it freeze for another 2 to 3 hours, 4 hours, and it's always frozen enough. And you can see this outside of the door is not iced up. It's the inner disc that has the ice on it. This is cool, but it's not all icy cold like that disc in there. It really seems to make a decent amount of difference with how much cold is coming out here. And that's still only during freezing at the beginning of the cycle, or if it sets a long time at the end of the freeze drying. When it's in the main process of vacuum and drying, it really doesn't matter. We'll be back on this one in 2 days also, just like on my sister's. So don't go away, it'll be just a second on these. I'm back. So it's got about an hour and a quarter left, but I'm not going to be available an hour and a quarter from now. And the top tray is less than 100 still. So I'm going to go ahead and just give it more extra time right now. And then we'll come back and do the first dry check later. We have it set for a 12-hour extra dry time to hopefully make sure that it's dry each time. It almost never is, even after that much drying time. We usually have to do at least one additional 2 hour for dry check. So it's often not dry even with that extra. There's almost no chance that it's actually dry. It could be. And if I were going to be around over the next few hours, I would go ahead and check it in an hour and a quarter and then start the dry check. But since I'm not going to be, I'm going to go ahead and just give it extra time right now. I added 3 more hours, so now it says about 4 and a quarter hours to go, and I should be able to take care of it then. Before we go, we'll go take a quick look at my machine. I turned both machines on within a couple of minutes of each other. I started my machine, then went over to my sister's and got hers started. So it's just a few minutes apart. Mine says it has about 9 and a quarter hours. Hers had about 1 and a quarter hours. So about 8 hours difference. But that's from the time of starting them for pre-cooling. I didn't put the food in mine until it had been going for about 3.5 hours. And I put the food in hers at about 4.5 hours. This only had about an hour more time in the machine than hers. So we could take that into account when we say hers was faster, but how much faster? Now, on mine, let's see if we can see that. So we can see the tray temperatures. This top one's about 72 right now. This second one is only about 34 degrees right now. Next one down is about 8 degrees, and the bottom one is about 50 something degrees. So currently the top one is the hottest, the bottom one is the second hottest. So, and that's what I mean by, on the average, the middle 2 trays tend to be the hottest, but not all of the time during the cycle. It seems like the top and bottom are often warmer sometime earlier in the process, and then these 2 catch up and then pass them as far as temperature goes. So they're currently the coldest by a considerable amount. It's more than a 60-degree swing between tray 1 and tray 3. We'll come back and check that one, but we have a lot of hours to go, and those temperatures all need to get up to about 120 before it's worth checking. We're back again. I missed the freeze dryer finishing, but it's only been done for a few minutes, and I can tell because of the thermometers in the food that it's still nice and toasty. That, and combined with the shelf temperature here, which shows me approximately the temperature, the back of this second shelf up at the back where the little temperature probe is on that shelf. So that combined tells me that it's still plenty warm to take out and check for the beginning of the dry check. So we'll take them out, start the dry check, and get them back in there. Open the drain valve. And as soon as the pressures are equalized, we can get them out and check them. The thermometers right now are showing about 85, 105, 105, and about 90. They were about 5 degrees warmer for each of those a little while ago. Okay, so starting with tray 1. And as usual, I'm going to swap the two positions of the first two and the second set. Is 797. This is just the dry check. It doesn't matter that I have a thermometer in it because I'm going to weigh it for the dry checks with the thermometers. I weigh it for the actual weight of the product before I start without the thermometer, and then when I'm finished, I take the thermometer out and weigh it again. This middle check of the dry check doesn't matter as long as you do it the same on both parts, because this weight is only relative. Is it losing weight from now versus a couple hours from now? Okay, tray 2, and I'm going to put tray 1 in that space. 810. So if I were just going by feel, I would say they're done already, and they very well may be, but I don't guess, I check. So tray 3, 805, and tray 4. And this tray is cold on the bottom. This shelf space being close to the barrel, it cools down much quicker. 788. We'll get this reclosed, get the drain valve closed, and we'll restart it. So we're going to add more dry time. Continue. And I'm going to put 3 hours. And I might check it in as little as 2 hours, but I have my machine to go check also, and that'll be in that same time frame. Next, we'll go to my machine and check it, see where it's at right now. Now we're over at my machine again, and if we assume the thermometers are working properly, the top shelf is the warmest shelf at 120. Next one down is almost 120, then about 65, and about 75. Judging from that, I would say that there's no chance that it'll be done yet, because this one is only 65 and this one's only 75. If all 4 of them were up about the 120, then I'd say yes, they could be dry. But I'm not even going to check them until these two get to at least 100. And the timer on the machine still says that it has about 3 3/4 hours to go. We'll come back and check it later. So this batch has been in there now for about 47 hours of dry time. That includes the freezing, so freezing and dry time. And I gave it a long freeze time because they weren't pre-frozen. Usually I only need 3 to 6 hours of freeze time because I put everything in there pre-frozen. This took about 8 or 10 hours to freeze because I was putting it in there warm, and it's a lot of material to put in there. It was a little over 10 pounds, 10.1 pounds. Now, the thermometers have come up since we checked it before. The lowest one is now 90 degrees, and it's the bottom. And then we have 100 degrees, and then the top 2 are currently 120 degrees. So I'm going to take them out now and check them for the dry check, and then we'll put them back in there for at least 2 more hours. It's getting late in the day and I'd like to get these finished today, but it's not required. I could just leave them in there overnight and it's not going to hurt anything. Let's get them out and check them. So I'll bypass the rest of the time. And as soon as the pressure is equalized, we'll be able to get them out. Okay. So starting at the top with tray 1. And very toasty because I'm taking them out when they're still 120 degrees. 915, and of course they feel dry. They almost always do, even when there's still a bit of moisture left in. And this one's very toasty. 927. You can see which ones that I didn't get enough of the ascorbic acid on, and so they started to turn brown before they ever made it into the freeze dryer. So I got the drain valve closed. I'm going to put more dry time. Continue. It's cool enough. And going to bump this up to 3 hours, mostly to give myself time because I know my sister's machine is going to be finished somewhere in the next couple hours, and I want to be able to take care of it. So next, back to my sister's machine to do bagging, assuming the dry check said they're dry. I'm back with this apple batch in my sister's machine to check to see if it lost any more weight. If it lost weight, then it wasn't dry, and we're going to put it in for more time. And because it's getting later in the day, I'm going to blow it off till tomorrow if it still needs more time. So I'll bypass the last little over 20 minutes. We'll open the drain valve and get them out. First, let's check the thermometers. And we're about 100 on the top and bottom, 105 on the bottom, 120 in the middle too. And because we switched them around, the ones that were at the 100 are now at the 120. So the fruit should be dry, and we'll find out. So bypass the rest of that time, open the drain valve. As soon as the pressure is equalized, we can get them out. Okay, I'm going to start with tray 1. And it's very toasty. It is 120 degrees on that tray. Maybe higher. This says 134, so it's hot. And with her machine, it has the air flowing out underneath, so I'll block that pathway of air to make sure it doesn't lift up on the scale. And 796, and that's 2.5 hours. It's 1 gram less than 1% maximum. Let's check the other trays. Okay, tray 2, 810, so no change, and that's exactly what we're after. Tray 3, no change, and tray 4, and no change. They were dry. That's good, then we can take them out. I will stop the machine with no defrost, turn off the fans, make it a bit quieter in here. One of the things I don't like about my sister's machine is the number goes away, the amount of time. So if you don't remember to note that before you finish the program, it doesn't tell you how long that batch took from this screen anyway. So we'll get the defrost baffle in place and the fan. And I won't turn this on until we're done, so we don't have to listen to it. We'll get the thermometers out and get the final weights without thermometers. Tray 4, 780. And tray 3, and making sure that it's not touching, 797. Tray 2, 801, and tray 1, 788. Because this is going to take a few minutes to get these bagged, I'm going to go ahead and put them in a large zipper bag until I am ready for them. If I don't have the bags ready and can bag it in just a few minutes, this is kind of how I like to take care of them. Keeps them from absorbing moisture as fast out of the air. And these kind of bags aren't anywhere near as good as a heavy mylar bag, but they are better than leaving them out on the trays. That's a 2-gallon bag, so this would be the equivalent of about 2 number 10 cans of apple cubes. We'll get the math done on the net weight of these, and then we'll be ready for the labels. So there's the math on this one. It started out as 8.4 pounds. Now it's 538 grams, so a little over a pound, pound and a quarter of weight total now. It lost 3,281 grams of weight during that, so all that water. Now a pound weighs about 63.7 grams, and 3/4 of a pound would be 47.8. So I've got both of these because I'm not sure how I'm going to bag it. We'll test to see what will fit. And then I can also put the amount of water loss, so how much water you'd need to put back in to equal the pound or the 3/4 pound. If in case you ever want to use it in a recipe, for a lot of types of recipes you could just put it in water, let it absorb what it needs, and then drain it and then put it in there. But for some things you might want to put in that extra amount of water or juice or whatever, maybe apple juice, and into a recipe like cake or muffins or something. And so you might want to put them in dry and just add that amount of liquid to the batter. Anyway, so I'll put that on the bag in case I need to use it sometime. Now we'll test to find out how much will fit in the bag. So I'm going to just use this cup as a scoop and tear that out so it zeroes out the scale, and then we'll put in about 63.7 grams and then test that in a bag. So that would be about 3/4 pound. I don't think a pound's gonna fit in the bag. Well, let's get a bag and test it. Okay, so here's one of the quart bags, and I've got the batch number already on there. That way, if the label gets torn off, it fades, whatever, I can still refer back to these notes and get the data for what this batch is. Now, let's test it to find out what will fit in here. I might be able to stuff the whole pound in there. I'm not going to try. I'm going to go ahead and do 3/4 pound in a bag. Yep. So I'm going to pour this back out for now, because it's easier to label the bags when they're flat. We'll get the labels and come right back. So my target number is 47.8 grams for the 3/4 pound. I'm just going to use this cup as a scoop and get about 47.8. And it's going to be plus or minus a teeny bit with most of them. So that's 3/4 pound. It'll still be fairly easy to close, but if I go for the full pound, it's never going to close well. This part has to be snacked on, and these are good. These will be so good in things like oatmeal or muffins or cakes, or you could make anything about them, little pies. Wow. So, as usual, using 300 cc oxygen absorbers, and this is a pack that has only 9 left. We used one and resealed it, and you can see the oxygen indicator went back to the original color, like this unopened one. As soon as we open it, they'll turn kind of a purple color as soon as the oxygen hits that sensor, and it only takes a few seconds. You can see how fast they go before they're dark color. They'll go back to this color if you put them in a bag without oxygen, you know, so when I put them into this bag later, they'll get back to that color. And then I'll tuck them down the side to make sure they stay out of the zipper, and kind of move them over so that I don't forget which ones have oxygen absorbers. And then to close them, I'm just pulling on the 2 sides, and then I kind of zip across. Next, we'll get them heat sealed so they'll be ready for storage. I'm trying to get it right at the top of the bag to leave myself room for a couple more chances if I do a bad job, or it gets a bad seal, or if I want to cut it off, use part of it and then reseal it. So I've got room for 2 more seals before that tear off strip, and then there's still one more room for 1 more before it gets to the zipper. And you can cut the zipper off and seal it down on the rest of the bag too, and seal the bag lower and lower as you go. In general, we don't do that, but you could. All right, a nice smooth seal across there with a little waffle print from the fabric.
Taxi!
The last thing we're doing, as always, is we're weighing each one of them and putting the weight in grams at the bottom of the bag so we know if we've got a bad bag. So later, if we weigh this and it's more than 74 grams, we'll know that somehow moisture is getting through this bag. That means either it's a bad bag, I did a bad seal, it's got a puncture in it, something's wrong with the bag and allowing moisture to get in. Now they're ready for the shelf and for long-term storage. Let's see if we got this going. So it's been 2.5 more hours. And what time of day is it? Anybody know?
7.
Oh, geez, it's not even that late, and I'm done with it.
7:24.
Gosh, and I'm not. Yeah, I'm just done with it. Boy, if this isn't done. I'd be just happy as can be just to wait. What an attitude. Got a bad attitude. And I forgot. I lost one pencil. Hello, pencil. All right. Would have been good if I started that recorder. Hey, now the little red lights or dots on. You weasel machine. But we have it with at least one recorder, so moving on.